Walk through Tokyo for a few hours and something starts feeling strange. Fast food is everywhere. Convenience stores like 7-Eleven, Lawson, and Family Mart are everywhere. Vending machines line almost every street. People eat ramen late at night, desserts are sold in nearly every station, and snacks are everywhere you look. But despite all of that, you barely see obese people. And it's not just an impression either. Japan has one of the lowest obesity rates in the developed world. Compared to countries like the United States, the difference is massive. At first, the answer seems obvious. Healthier food, more walking, smaller portions. That's what most people think. But after spending more time here and looking deeper into it, I realized there might be much more behind it than that. Because the further you go into Japanese daily life, the stranger this starts to feel. In the United States, breakfast often means sugary cereal, pancakes, waffles, or fast food grabbed on the way to work. Nearly half of Americans regularly start their day with cereal alone, and supermarkets are filled with colorful boxes loaded with sugar. But in Japan, breakfast looks completely different. Rice, fish, miso soup, pickled vegetables, smaller portions. Even from the beginning of the day, the food environment feels less focused on sugar and excess, and that difference continues almost everywhere you go. One of the biggest surprises for me was the convenience stores. In America, gas stations and convenience stores are usually filled with giant sodas, candy, heavily processed snacks, and oversized meals. But in Japan, stores like 7-Eleven, Lawson, and Family Mart feel completely different. You walk in and see rice bowls, grilled fish, fresh egg sandwiches, bento boxes, soups, and onigiri lined up everywhere. Even the drinks are usually smaller. Instead of giant supersized cups becoming normal, portions in Japan often feel controlled without even trying. And it's not that Japanese people never eat unhealthy food. Ramen shops stay busy late into the night, desserts are everywhere, and fast food absolutely exists here too. But compared to the United States, the average daily food choices often feel less extreme. Even the presentation of the meals changes something psychologically. Food is usually separated carefully, balanced, and eaten more slowly. People often stop eating when they feel satisfied instead of completely full, but even after looking at the food, the portions, and the eating habits, it still didn't fully explain what I was seeing in Japan. One thing I started noticing very quickly in Japan is that people are almost constantly moving. Not in the way you might expect. It's not like everybody is walking around in gym clothes or jogging through the streets all day. In fact, many Japanese people don't even think of it as exercise at all. It's just built into daily life. In the United States, many cities were designed around cars. You drive to work, drive to the store, drive to restaurants, and sometimes barely walk at all during the day. But in Japan, especially in cities like Tokyo, the entire environment pushes people to move naturally. Even older people stay surprisingly active simply because daily life almost requires movement. And once you start paying attention to it, you realize how much those small movements add up over time. Tokyo alone moves millions of people through public transportation every single day. And unlike in many Western countries, public transport here doesn't remove movement from your life. It actually creates more of it. You're constantly walking from one place to another. Even the cities themselves feel designed differently. Smaller streets, fewer massive parking lots, more compact neighborhoods. Stores, restaurants, and train stations are often close together, which makes walking feel normal instead of inconvenient. And because of that, staying active in Japan often happens without people even trying to work out. It becomes part of the routine instead of a separate activity. So by this point, the low obesity rate was starting to make more sense. But there was still something about Japan that felt different, and it had nothing to do with food or exercise. One of the biggest differences I noticed in Japan wasn't necessarily the food itself, but the amount of it. In countries like the United States, huge portions have slowly become normal. Giant soft drinks, oversized fast food meals, massive snack bags, all-you-can-eat restaurants, free refills. Over time, people stop realizing how much they're actually consuming because the larger size becomes the standard. But in Japan, daily portions often feel noticeably smaller. And strangely enough, after a while, they don't even feel small anymore. They just feel normal. You see it almost everywhere. In convenience stores like 7-Eleven, Lawson and Family Mart, most meals are carefully portioned. Bento boxes are separated into smaller sections with rice, vegetables, meat, or fish balanced together instead of one giant serving dominating the entire meal. Even the snacks and desserts usually come in smaller sizes compared to what you'd often see in America. Drinks too. In many American fast food restaurants, the largest soda can look almost absurdly big. In Japan, even the large sizes often feel moderate by comparison. After a while, I started realizing something important. Maybe Japan's low obesity rate wasn't only about what people were eating. Maybe it was also about the habits and mindset people develop around food from a very young age. In many Western countries, eating is often connected to abundance. Big portions are seen as satisfying, and overeating during celebrations, holidays, or nights out is completely normal. But in Japan, the relationship with food often feels much more controlled. There's even a well-known idea in Japanese culture that encourages people to stop eating before they feel completely full. Instead of eating until they physically can't anymore, the goal is often to eat just enough. In many places across Japan, eating is treated as something you sit down and focus on, instead of constantly doing while moving around. That sense of discipline also seems connected to routine. Many Japanese people eat at more regular times, follow similar daily habits, and grow up in environments where moderation is normalized instead of extremes. And honestly, that may be one of the biggest differences of all, because in Japan, staying relatively thin often doesn't come from intense dieting culture alone. In Japan, they're often taught extremely early, sometimes starting from childhood itself. In Japan, many of these habits start long before adulthood. They begin in school. And the more I looked into the Japanese school system, the more I realized it's teaching far more than just academics. From a young age, children are introduced to routines built around discipline, responsibility, and group behavior. Even lunch works differently. In many Japanese schools, students don't simply rush into a cafeteria and grab whatever they want. Meals are often planned to be balanced, portions are controlled, and students themselves help serve the food to their classmates. That might sound small, but it changes the entire atmosphere around eating. The meal becomes structured, shared, organized, and because everybody eats together, there's also less culture around overconsumption or constantly standing out from the group. The same thing happens outside the classroom too. Many children walk to school instead of being driven everywhere. Students also regularly clean their own classrooms and hallways, which creates routines of movement and responsibility from a very young age. Over time, those habits become normal daily behavior, rather than something people force themselves to do later in life. In Japan, appearance can sometimes quietly affect how people are judged socially and professionally. Not necessarily in an obvious or openly aggressive way, but in subtle ways tied to the country's strong culture around neatness, self-control, and fitting in. Being slim is often associated with discipline and good self-management, while being visibly overweight can sometimes attract unwanted attention or judgment. And the more I researched this side of Japan, the more I realized there was a darker layer behind the country's low obesity rate that most tourists never notice. Because in Japan, being thin is not always seen as just a health choice. Sometimes it's connected to social acceptance itself. Japan is a society where fitting in matters a lot. You notice it in the way people dress, the way they behave in public, even the way they speak around others. Standing out too much can sometimes attract unwanted attention, and body image quietly becomes part of that system too. And for people who are overweight, that pressure can feel very real. Not always through direct insults or confrontation. In many cases, it's much more subtle than that. The comments from family members, the expectations at work, the feeling of being judged in public spaces. Over time, that pressure can slowly shape how people see themselves. And in some situations, it may even affect careers. In Japan, job applications often require photos, especially for more traditional companies or customer-facing positions. A slim and well-groomed appearance is sometimes associated with discipline, professionalism, and self-control. Meanwhile, being visibly overweight can unfairly create assumptions about laziness or lack of discipline. A 2010 survey even found that around 1 in 4 Japanese employers admitted weight could negatively affect hiring decisions. And then there's something even more surprising. In 2008, Japan introduced what became known as the Metabo Law. The law targets metabolic syndrome and requires companies and local governments to monitor waist measurements for adults between certain ages. For men, waistlines above a certain limit can trigger mandatory health guidance and follow-ups. Companies themselves are encouraged to reduce obesity-related health risks among employees. Now technically, being overweight is not illegal in Japan. But when workplaces are pushed to keep obesity numbers low, the pressure naturally spreads into company culture too. And while not every company treats this aggressively, the existence of the system alone says a lot about how seriously body weight is viewed in Japanese society. And honestly, once you learn about all of this, Japan starts feeling very different. At first, it looks like a country that simply figured out healthier living. But underneath that image, there's also pressure. Pressure to stay disciplined, pressure to stay presentable, pressure to not become the person who stands out. And that pressure can become especially intense for women and for people working in customer-facing industries where appearance is heavily valued. Some people thrive in this environment, others feel trapped by it. Which is why Japan's low obesity rate is much more complicated than it first appears. Because yes, healthier food matters, walking matters, portion sizes matter, but culture, expectations, and social pressure matter too. And maybe that's the real reason this country feels so different from much of the Western world.